or something?
Um, I go from Casnovia to Barneveld for work. It's an hour commute. It's not too bad. But
So you're on a train.
no, just I stopped off at a restaurant. I'm just having some pretzel bites and listening in. I didn't want to get the kids too excited that I was home from work and ready to play. So I'm stopping off, and it breaks up my drive, which is nice too. As soon as they see me by Thursday or Friday, they're ready to tackle me and just have 100% attention by the time I make it home. How are the grandkids?
I guess they're fine. I'll see a couple of them. They're coming in for the Thanksgiving Day parade with me. So.
Nice. Are you in New York?
Yes.
Because we have a wonderful one here in Philadelphia as well, which they didn't have last year.
Oh, yeah, they didn't have it here in New York either last year, but the first one in New York was in 1924.
Oh.
Yeah, but it wasn't on Central Park West. I think it was on Broadway.
Right.
There's a wonderful children's book called Balloons Over Broadway by Melissa Sweet. And it explains all about the origins of the Thanksgiving Day parade, the balloons, the puppets, all of that. Yeah, I just bought that for my grandkids, so I'll give it to them on Thursday.
Hi, Jody. I'm glad you got on.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this.
That's great. Well, after 5 years, it's 5 years since the Washington, D.C. meeting, or 6 years since OMEP had its meeting in Washington, D.C. with Marion Wright Edelman on this. At least 5 years.
Oh, yeah, it has been. Well,
nice to see you in person. And virtually, I should say. We've been talking on the phone.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, for me, the most exciting thing is I think we are coming close, maybe, to getting USNC membership in the United Nations. And you do know that, gosh, a couple of us worked on this a number of years ago when Obama was president, and he sent the letter requesting that we be put to the Senate to pass to, but anyhow, we're sitting there in the Senate asking for a vote on accepting us, and then if they do, then that goes to the current president and so forth. But right now, there is a letter in there from Obama requesting that this be taken to the Senate for a vote. So,
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
but nothing has happened since. And every year I do write one letter asking members to write just to their senator and asking to bring this up and vote on it. And nothing has happened, but anyhow, that's where we are.
I remember at one point the new president, I can't remember whether it was Obama or Clinton, but the new president
Clinton signed it, but the Clinton did sign it, yes.
Maybe it was Obama. I think it was when Obama came into office.
Signed it because I brought it to his secretary and she had him sign it. Anyhow.
Good for you.
Oh,
you
wow.
got the farthest along.
Been a
But
while.
I remember there was a letter from the Republican head of the Senate Committee on international conventions that said, go ahead and send us some conventions, but don't even think about the Children's Rights Convention.
Right. That's what prompted the Washington meeting. But and also John Sir was involved with it very much as well. And Dodie and John were really pushing it.
I would like to see it. I think the title here is If Not Now, When?
That's right. Well, I think, yeah. Would be very much.
Children under 18 make up more than 1/3 of the world's population. In 2017, there were approximately 2.5 billion children, and on current trends, another 2 billion will be born by 2025. In New South Wales alone, there are currently 1.7 million children. In numbers alone, children are central to the world we live in, as they make up a large and important part of society. Investing in children is both an opportunity and a duty.
It is an opportunity because the gains achieved through better nutrition, healthcare, education and protection are likely to be far greater and longer lasting than those in almost any other area. And it is our duty because children everywhere have human rights from the very beginning of their lives. These rights include the right to survive and develop, to be protected from violence, abuse and exploitation, to have their views respected, and have actions concerning them to be taken in their best interests.
These rights are found in a number of treaties and international standards, most importantly in the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC. The CRC matters more than many people imagine. For one, in recognising that children have rights, it becomes a government's responsibility to respect, protect and fulfil these rights, rather than an optional act of charity or kindness. The CRC binds governments to a set of internationally accepted human rights articles that must be followed. This means that people who work for the government must consider and apply the provisions of the CRC in all aspects of their work affecting children.
The CRC provides a way to monitor government's progress on children's rights and a basis for children's organisations, advocates and children themselves to argue for change. Full implementation of the CRC goes a long way to ensuring that each child's entitlement to equality, dignity and respect is upheld. There's been a long-standing focus on protecting vulnerable children as a charitable response to suffering. However, at the start of the 20th century, some activists started promoting the idea that children should have rights. In 1924, with the aftermath of the First World War, Eglantine Jebb and others campaigned for the first International Declaration of the Rights of the Child.
During the International Year of the Child in 1979, Poland proposed that there should be a convention for children. Over the next decade, countries around the world debated and negotiated the text of what would become the most widely supported human rights treaty the UN ever produced, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child.
The United Nations is an international organization committed to maintaining peace, security, and promoting human rights. One of the ways it does this is through international human rights agreements. The CRC is one of these and sets a global human rights agenda for every person under the age of 18. It was recognized by nearly every UN member state in 1989. And is now the world's most ratified human rights treaty. In Australia, the CRC was ratified in December 1990.
Those who benefit from human rights treaties are known as rights holders. So, in this case, anyone under the age of 18 is a rights holder. This applies irrespective of their sex, gender, religion, race, disability, sexuality, and even whether they're a citizen of the country or not. Parents and guardians are of course central in the lives and development of children. Under the Convention, they are entitled to assistance from the state in raising their children.
Countries that ratify treaties are called states parties. In agreeing to be bound by these treaties, they become known as duty bearers, meaning that they have the duty to uphold the articles of the Convention. In practice, this includes everyone who works for the government, such as police officers, lawyers, teachers and social workers.
As the convention is an agreement between states parties, individual citizens do not have any responsibility to uphold it. However, if they work for or act on behalf of the country's government, then they do. For example, if there's a culture of bullying in a school, the school has responsibility to take appropriate action so that all the children can learn in a safe environment.
The children are not under any obligations under the Convention, but should, of course, be guided by staff not to infringe the rights of the child being bullied.
The Convention describes the obligation states parties have to all children living within its borders. The Convention is wide-reaching and covers many aspects of children's lives. Rights are described by articles. There are 4 important articles that apply across all other rights in the Convention. Article 2 is the right to non-discrimination. It affirms that state parties shall respect and ensure the rights set forth in the present Convention to each child within their jurisdiction without discrimination of any kind, irrespective of the child's or his or her parents' or legal guardian's race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic or social origin, property, disability, birth, or other status.
Article 3 is about children's best interests. It states, in all actions concerning children, whether undertaken by public or private social welfare institutions, courts of law, administrative authorities, or legislative bodies, the best interests of the child shall be a primary consideration.
Article 6 is to the right of life, survival, and development. It states that every child has the inherent right to life and that states parties shall ensure to the maximum extent possible the survival and development of the child.
Article 12 is the right to participate. It provides that any child who is capable of forming his or her own views has the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting a child, and their views must be given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child.
In addition, Article 30 of the CRC affirms that all children, including First Nations children, have the right to enjoy their own culture and to use their own language.
The other rights can be grouped into 5 categories, including civil rights and freedoms, family environment and alternative care, health and welfare, education and leisure, and special protection measures that cover children in emergency situations, justice systems, child exploitation, and children belonging to minority groups. These rights are indivisible and interdependent. That means that the failure to provide for one can affect the enjoyment of the others. For example, if the state fails to ensure that children have an adequate standard of living, children might not be healthy, able to develop, or learn to their full potential. An additional 3 optional protocols have been included in the Convention over the years, related to military conflict, the sale of children, and individual complaints by children to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I am Therese Hurst-Clare, and along with my co-chair, Margaret Jones, welcome. Welcome to you. Welcome to the NGO Committee on Children's Rights monthly meeting. Today, we're observing UN World Children's Day and the 32nd anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We are so honored to have with us 3 experts and leaders in the children's rights movement in the United States, and also the voices of children, 3 performances by children and young people. So without further ado, let me introduce our first group of children, the 4th grade music class from Carrie E. Thompson School in Croton, New York, under the direction of Marlena Horton. The children will sing Unity.
That's what my heart
That was absolutely beautiful. And imagine singing with a mask covering your face. And they sang, and we could understand every word. And I'm sure they didn't have little microphones under those masks. It is Marlena Horton's wonderful training. We thank you, Marlena. We thank the Carrie E. Tompkins School in Croton-on-Hudson, New York. I believe that's the 4th grade. Marlena is also the secretary of this committee. Well done.
Gloria Rice? Okay, thanks.
The NGO Committee on Children's Rights has been one of the pioneers in advocacy for adoption, ratification, and the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, also known as CRC, since its inception in 1989. For the first time, a binding human rights instrument incorporates social and economic rights, as well as civil and political rights. The CRC is the most ratified international treaty. Its guiding principles for implementations are 1, non-discrimination, 2, best interest of the child, 3, the right to survival and development, and 4, the views of the child. Investing in children is both an opportunity and a duty. We here at the NGO Committee on Children's Rights certainly find very important. So the purpose of today's program will focus on the United States and where it stands regarding the CRC and its ratification process. So before we meet our very impressive panel of experts, I want to introduce to you a young man who calls himself Superman. Superman is from the Crow Nation. He grew up in Montana. He is a traditional fancy dancer, but he's done something incredible. And what is that? He has combined Crow traditions, Crow spirituality, the tradition of fancy dancing, and hip hop. So let's listen to Superman as he performs Know Better, Do Better.
Across the block, Kahe Balaja, where I get my chala. Who Reporting live from the universe, it's the First Nations MC. You could do the search, who been through the worst, surviving genocide, fighting for a better life. They try to set aside the true history and keep us mystical. They say they founded this country on biblical principles. It's so cynical, but I'm an analyst. It's murderous, they refer to us as merciless. Indian savages, now that's written in the Declaration of Independence. That's no kidding. Hey, open up your heart and let love lead the way. Light your path with the words that I speak today. Let the lessons flow, arrive and bless your soul. Systematic racism alive, intentional. Know better, do better, it's the motto. It's the good medicine, the hard pill to swallow. Know better, do better, it's the motto. It's the good medicine, the hard pill to swallow.
His daily life was filled with ceremony, and every act had some significance. The Indians believed in the spiritual, the mysterious.
Well, I told you he was very talented. And what's so wonderful about Superman, whose real name is, that's his performance name. His crow name is Christian Paris. And what's so wonderful about him is how the Crow elders have embraced and encouraged his work, because they recognize he is keeping Crow traditions alive. He's educating the youth and in a way that they can relate, so the tradition flourishes. Know better, do better. Thank you, Marlena, for introducing him to us. Let's continue our journey today into the well-being and the rights of children in America. I want to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Martha Bragan. Martha Bragan, PhD, LCSW, is an associate professor at the Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College, City University of New York. She is chair of Global Social Work and Practice with Immigrants and Refugees. Dr. Bragan came to academic social work after over 30 years in the field, working with governments, NGOs, and UN organizations in the United States and globally to collaborate with communities in adversity, to support families, to support children so that they are able to grow up well and participate in transforming the world in which we all live. Welcome, Dr. Martha Bragan. You have the floor.
It is such an honor to be here today with, of course, the distinguished panel I'm about to introduce, with my colleagues from this illustrious committee, and to be in the presence of the work of children and young people who are doing this next generation of transformation. And we are so grateful to you, Marlena, to introducing us to these transforming actors. So right now, it is my honor to introduce as well our panelists and distinguished leaders in the movement for children's rights and the US ratification of the CRC. I will introduce them one at a time. So we're starting with Meg Gardenier. Meg is an international not-for-profit advocate specializing in women and children's issues. She has over 25 years experience in non-governmental organizational development, advocacy, fundraising, strategic leadership, and volunteer management. Meg's professional life spans a range of organizations where she held leadership positions. Since July 2015, she is Secretary General of Child Fund Alliance, a network of child development organizations working in 63 countries with an annual turnover of $0.5 billion. Previously, she was the senior coordinator for the Elevate Children Funders Group, a consortium of funders dedicated to preventing violence against children and family separation. Additional positions include Director of the Arigato International, New York, Managing Director for Education and Community Partnerships in the U.S., in the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, and Executive Director of the International Catholic Child Bureau, U.S. She has undertaken consultancies for Save the Children and the Global Network of Religions for Children. Ms. Gardenier is a founding member of the Campaign for U.S. Ratification of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, where she is serving as its volunteer chair. She's a board member of End Child Prostitution and Trafficking, ECPAT USA, and the Westchester Child Care Council. Meg earned an MA in International Political Economy and Development at Fordham University. She's married to Thomas Lauder and is a mother of 3 daughters. They reside in Westchester County. Meg, over to you.
Martha, thank you. That I should have shortened the short bio. It's about as long as my presentation, but it was kind of you to read it out. And I'm really, really happy to be with all of you today and really commend the work that's being done by the committee and for highlighting Universal Children's Day through this conversation. I will give you a little PowerPoint presentation. It isn't anything that elaborate, but I just thought it gave a little structure to our conversation. And I understand I have about 15 minutes. So really talking to you today in my role as a child advocate for all these years. Martha and I used to work together on some of the NGO committee on UNICEF group that we did many years ago on children in armed conflicts. We've been around for a while, she and I, and have seen different things. And I think what I've been doing, I just wanted to do today for a few minutes is give you a background about what we tried to do with the US campaign to ratify the Children's Convention, where it led us, and what I think some of the challenges are right now for all of us in this community. And I think we have some terrific opportunities. I thought that opening video was fantastic. The young people were super, the level of creativity and enthusiasm out there, and all of the new opportunities that have emerged because of social media, I think bring tremendous possibility to this movement. So if I can, I'm going to see if I can try to share this screen. I'm still learning how to do that. I'm a little bit on the. There
we go.
Yeah. Okay. It seems to have done. Okay. There we go. So let me go back here. Yeah, I love your title. I've been using the same title for about 20 years, thinking every time there's a new administration, somehow there's going to be a possibility of ratification. But I have to think really positively here about what we can accomplish with the Biden administration. But a lot of my comments today will be some of the work that we did during the Obama years and before that. there were many movements over time to ratify the Treaty on the Rights of the Child. I'm just going to talk about the moment in time that I entered and got engaged in all this. I was a very young woman in 1989 when the United Nations adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It was November 20th of 1989, and Jim Grant was the executive director of UNICEF, and he'd really pushed this through. And it got bolstered enormously when he convened one of the world's first global summits for children in June of 1990. So the treaty became ratified quite quickly, and all governments were encouraged to set up national committees for ratification. And so there were some that preceded my time that I just was involved with. But I'll tell you, the moment for us and a group of us in this field occurred during the United Nations Special Session on Children that took place in 2002 at the UN. And it was a 5-year review process from the UN Summit on Children, which had taken place in 1990. Actually, it was more than that. It was a 15-year review. Yeah, it was a 10-year review of the UN Summit on Children. And when we were there, it was during the Bush administration, and the US government was just really not supportive of the treaty at all and trying to undermine the treaty's presence in a lot of global documents that were put forward at the UN special session. So a group of us from Covenant House, I was at US Fund for UNICEF at the time, and others, I can't remember all the names of people, but we just got together in the hallway and said, this is ridiculous. We're going to restart the campaign. We don't really have any money. We're just going to figure out how to do it. So on February 14th of 2002 at Covenant House in Washington, we reestablished the Convention on the Rights of the Child campaign and did manage to run it for about 16 years through various means. Some years we had paid coordinators, other years we just worked on a volunteer level, but we had a steering committee, we had a staff member at one point. We did get a modest grant from the Oak Foundation. We did office Senate visits. We had a number of things that we attempted to do. Of course, we did not ratify the treaty, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to just give you a snapshot overview of what we tried to do all those years, and then I'll come back to what happened. The steering committee, we had a website, we had toolkits, we had CRC mobilization days, we had state and city resolutions, we engaged the Senate. And so some highlights here were that we were able to meet with Samantha Power when she was, this is going back 10 years, of course, when she was with the Obama administration. And she was very supportive of the treaty, but really wanted us to make a stronger case that there was two things, what is the benefit to the US if this is ratified? And how can you refresh your Senate office visits? How can you demonstrate that there is political will for this treaty? And we in fact did, through Covenant House, have an opportunity to host a significant number of Senate office visits right before Obama had taken office. There were about a small team of people undertook about 45 maybe Senate office visits. We always felt that if we wanted to get the treaty ratified, we needed a hard 72 to get to 67. And it was interesting when the team went on these Senate office visits and they said, would you ratify the treaty if it went to the Senate today or tomorrow? A surprising number said yes, a fair number said maybe, very few said no. But what they did want was to be assured that they would be backup for it, because the treaty didn't really, it was, Marian Wright Edelman once said, this is like 10th on everyone's list. It was never a top priority because you couldn't make the case as to what specifically could happen for children's issues in the United States. Our campaign took the tack that it was up to us. We had the big US sign, United States, but us. Because if we ratified it, it would be a global treaty, and all of our colleagues globally with whom we work would be able to go to their governments and say, this is a universally ratified treaty, including US ratification. And I think we worked over time to figure out how it would add value to the US. I think there was a lot of different ways to look at that. A number of people have written about it. Howard Davidson at the American Bar Association, a number of scholars. We had a meeting it was I'm trying to think of when it was, 2008, actually, at Georgetown, in which we invited a number of scholars to, speak out on U.S. ratification and its impact. And Child Welfare League of America published a journal on it. So there are a lot of very good opinions on what can be done. But our challenge always was getting a really supportive population to get behind this in the same way that other treaties and other issues were gaining traction. And that's what we came back to at the Senate office visits. Since they didn't want to take any flack for getting behind this treaty. They wanted us to do the heavy lifting for them, turn it over, and make sure they could go through without a hitch. What happened to us is that shortly after these series of Senate visits and a number of other initiatives that took place that we were part of, the disabilities treaty got pushed forward, and that was okay. We worked well with the disabilities team. They actually figured out a way to make a very solid case as to what would happen in the US if this treaty were to go through. What was really, unfortunate is that the day before that treaty was positioned for a Senate office vote, for a vote, there was a huge opposition campaign. It was Michael Huckabee at the time had his own show. He flashed the Senate office number up on the screen and said, this treaty is the worst thing in the world. And he gave all kinds of reasons why, and none of it was accurate. But in fact, he was, he was able to persuade enough people to call into the Senate, and that treaty didn't go through. And it all fell back on us, and the women's treaty and the children's treaty, that, if you can't get disabilities through, I don't think, you folks in the children's world are going to have much luck. So people stopped paying attention to us. And so we just went back in and tried to do everything that we could to support political mobilization in the ways that we talked about. What happened is we ran up against an opposition that was increasingly organized. Their arguments were around a number of things: parental and family rights, their interpretation of freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, their interpretation of freedom of association and freedom of information, and then a lack of understanding about the principles of sovereignty. But what I do want to point out here is that these treaties, these provisions, these civic and political right provisions, again, the right to freedom of information, the freedom of association, the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. These very provisions were introduced by the United States when the treaty was being drafted, which was in the 1980s during the Cold War in Geneva, and there was a 10-year process to draft the treaty. The US was active at the time. The Cold War was very, intense, and as we understood it, the delegation was told, you go to these global meetings and you show the East what the West provides for young people. So make sure you get these political, civil, and economic provisions in. At that point, they wanted to show the Russians that we allowed children a range of information, that they could join anything that they wanted to. They didn't have to run with state-sponsored textbooks. So that freedom of association, the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, all those did have its origin in the US. Maybe they did the right things for the wrong reasons, but they were certainly put into the treaty. The irony is, years later, the opposition is saying the freedom of association means that my child can join a gang. The freedom of information means that my child has access to pornography. My child can change his or her religion at any time, which, as we know, there are provisions about the evolving capacities of children. There was such a lack of understanding about the US role in drafting the treaty, and also about the provisions of the treaty themselves. And then we hit a lot of opposition from the homeschooling community. Not all homeschoolers, there are a lot of homeschoolers who are very progressive, but there was a network that really thought that the treaty was undermining homeschooling. So we actually engaged a number of interns, some very bright young women from Columbia University, and we had them study the committee reports over 2 years and give us a report out. And in fact, there was no evidence that the treaty would undermine homeschooling. As a matter of fact, in one case in Germany, there was a statement that Germany wanted to make sure that homeschoolers would get the same access as other. So, in a way, it wasn't an undermining of homeschooling, it was a support for it. So at that point, again, things changed, but at that point, there was very little to substantiate this. So the opposition, what was interesting to us is we knew the opposition had always been around. But what happened in the latter years of the Obama campaign was that it was coming out with these they were bombarding their senators with these simplistic messages, and they were effective, even though we don't want to think that. I was invited by a woman named Kim Fawcett, who was working in the legislature in Hartford at that point. I think now she's working with another organization altogether, but she was in politics for a while. She invited me to speak, at their Capitol on Universal Children's Day. And by the time I arrived, all of the people who were there had been bombarded with very simplistic messages about how terrible the treaty was. And I think what was happening is because we were so used to the opposition that we didn't understand that there was an element of this opposition that was gaining ground, and none of us were prepared for what I'm going to mention next. When we look at our little history, none of us were really prepared for what happened in 2016 when the Trump administration took over. And so all of the things that we were working on with our camp, we had as I mentioned, a steering committee, we had a website, we had toolkits to bring people, give people activities in their own communities. We had these mobilization days. We would have a network of campuses across the country, all giving updates or lectures on the Convention on the Rights of the Child at once and keeping track. As I mentioned, we did tri-state and city resolutions and Senate office visits. What was happening was, we were setting people up for failure because they would show up to some of these things or try to engage some of these politicians, and they would, they would get blasted by the opposition and not get the quality and the depth of the experience that they deserve, which is a good exchange, a good informed exchange about the treaty, why it's important. So a couple of things I just want to say, and I wish I had more things to say, but I just had to. These are very honest, assessments, and from my end, and from we do now. We've started. We meet again every other week. Our little CRC group. We are meeting informally, trying to figure out what to do. A couple of things that are very clear. One, the political landscape is increasingly complex. The classic methods of social mobilization that we undertook all those years are less effective. We need to equip the next generation with the knowledge of the campaign goals and new skills. So we know we have to do our work differently and better. But overarching all of this is that we need to identify champions outside of our own circle. Sorry, there's a missing sentence there. Who also have the trust, confidence, and support of those whom we need to persuade that this is in the best interest of the child. So I'm sorry that this phrase got screwed up before I put it off to you. But what I'm trying to say is we need to identify champions whom I would call are like cultural brokers, that they are some part of that movable middle. They understand the opposition or an element of the opposition and can talk to them, because we got labeled as the internationalist and people thought that we were out there trying to destroy parental rights, that we were using smokescreen language. I mean, the level of trust was at such a low, at an all-time low, that we felt like we never could get through in a credible way. I, at one point, called up the gentleman who was running the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund, and I said, I have a proposal for you, and that would be, let us identify our differences. Let us agree to a facilitator, okay, and to ground rules, and let's sit down behind closed doors and really begin to unearth some of these things. And all he wanted was to know was, would the media come? I said, no. And then he said, would the C-SPAN come? I said, no, it's not a media event. It's an honest intent for us to talk through our differences. And what I really came to understand about that particular group was there wasn't an honest commitment to look at the truth. There was an opportunity to exploit a fear. And I'm moving back in time a bit, but I think there are people out there who are exploiting the fears of the other, who perhaps are not knowledgeable about treaties, but they believe the person who communicates to them that the treaty is bad. That person has their trust. People think this person knows what they're talking about. They have more information than I do. They must be true. They must be accurate. Just like when I have a lease or a question about something I don't know, when I go to an attorney about a lease, I go to a medical doctor about an opinion, I go to people I trust when I don't understand something that I think might impact my life. I think we have layers of people out there who really are very fearful. They're losing their jobs. They're looking at society unraveling. They look to religious leaders for support or other leaders. Maybe they don't always make the best decision about who they put their faith in, but those, they are being led by people who don't have accurate information about the treaty. I can say that, and are not willing to engage in a conversation about how we can support the evidence and to bring a case forward that this treaty is in the best interest. Even if we have honest disagreements, that's something totally different than someone who outright does not, is basically putting out a lot of falsehoods about a treaty that the US had a fundamental role in developing. So that's our dilemma right now. We meet every other week. We have been engaging with some specialists about the sort of the climate right now in the United States, which, by the way, is not really great when it comes to children's rights legislation, looking at the issues that we have to unearth to figure out how we move a better policy dialogue forward. So I can tell you one thing, there's a lovely woman named Dr. Yvonne Vissing. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk to your crowd. She's at Salem State University. She's planning a conference next June. And we see this as another opportunity through pre-recorded, now we can do all these great things through Zoom to engage people who were in the civil rights community, who really went there and figured things out in tough times, to come and talk to younger people about some of the lessons they learned in the civil rights era that can be applied here. And then I think we're going to have another series, we're still working this out, about the new ways of social mobilization and how to get this out in a way that's credible, important, and impactful. But what we don't want to do is we do not want to set anybody up. We don't want to set people up to fail, which is why we're being very careful right now about figuring out what should we do? Where should the campaign go? It doesn't really even exist now. How do we, again, bring this down to the next generation? What's the right mechanism for it? And what are the right steps to take? So that's where we are. There's tons of things that have been done over time that I could talk about later, but I'm sure my 15, 20 minutes have elapsed. But I just want you to know, honest commitment in this country by a group of people like yourselves to keep this on the agenda. I think that's great. Let's just be really savvy that we don't throw ourselves out to people who don't want to engage with us. Let's find the right people to engage at the right time with the right information. So I will stop sharing now. Good, thank you.
Thank you so much, Meg, for that very detailed, careful, and heartfelt presentation. I am now once again most honored to introduce Dr. Barbara Bennett Woodhouse. Dr. Woodhouse will retire in 2022 from the LQC Lamar Professorship of Law at Emory University Law School after 32 years of teaching. She earned her law degree from Columbia University in 1983 and clerked for Associate Justice Sandra Day O'Connor at the Supreme Court in 1984 to 85, before joining the faculty of the University of Pennsylvania, where she co-founded the Multidisciplinary Center for Children's Policy Practice and Research, now the Field Center. She is also the Emeritus David H. Levin Chair in Family Law at University of Florida, where in 2001, she founded the Center on Children and Families. The UF Center recently celebrated its 20th year of advocacy for children. Professor Woodhouse was an early advocate for ratification of the CRC. In 2002, she headed the American Bar Association delegation to the UN Special Session on Children. During her career, she has published over 100 articles and 2 books on children's rights. Her award-winning book, Hidden in Plain Sight, The Tragedy of Children's Rights, From Ben Franklin to Lionel Tate, was published by Princeton University Press in 2008. In January 2020, New York University Press published her book, The Ecology of Childhood, How Our Changing World Threatens Children's Rights, a decade-long comparative study of children's well-being in peer countries where the CRC has been ratified. Welcome, Barbara Bennett Woodhouse, and over to you. Can you unmute, Barbara? Let me see if I can unmute you. I can't unmute you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, there I see it.
Ah,
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. And I can see a lot of commonalities between all of us here who have been speaking. I wanted to tell you, though, that the fourth graders who sang, that school is my hometown.
Oh,
And when that school was opened, I was one of the first fourth graders going to that school, and that was about it must have been about 1954. So I'm
Wow.
particularly proud of those kids who were singing that song. And it was such a thrill to see my old Carrie E. Tompkins School. But that was my hometown. I think we've all been working, both of us who have been, or all of us who have been speaking today have been working on trying to get the CRC ratified by the United States. And it's been an extraordinarily difficult process. But my part in it has been particularly around doing research and writing that might help both explain the CRC and the many, many reasons why the opposition to it is completely mistaken, but also to answer some of the questions that I was hearing from both sides, both I'll say right and left, or conservative and progressive, but from all sides, there were questions that needed answering. And my recent book on the ecology of childhood, one of the major parts of that book, one of the major objectives I had was to explore, was to examine the question that I'd heard from both sides, both sides that had some opposition. And from the right side, from the conservative side, it was all about how we already have a perfect constitution, which gives children tons of rights. Why should we move on to anything else? And wouldn't that CRC, instead of assisting us in bringing rights forward for children, wouldn't it become a sort of competitor and compete with parents' rights? So that was one side of the argument. And the other side of the argument was from progressives who said international treaties don't really help at all. They don't have any teeth. Nothing particularly good happens from them. And why should we bother? So throughout my research, and particularly in this book that I've worked on in the last decade, I was using some comparative studies to investigate the question of what difference does the Convention on the Rights of the Child make? And I'd been around the world in different places presenting on this. I know I've been to Japan and The Hague and Scotland and all over the world. But what I wanted to do in this particular book was really drill down into the micro level and look at, does the CRC make a difference once it's been ratified and it's being implemented? So I chose two comparison sites for my study. One was a small village in Italy, and the other, which has, of course, been an early adopter of the CRC, and the other was a small village in Florida in the United States, where no one has ever heard of the CRC. And so I was studying the ecology of childhood. Essentially, by that I mean the environment, the surrounding environment in which children are raised. And that environment is not just the family, it's a combination of all the different elements that impact children's lives. So you've got the microsystems. I'm using Yuri Bronfenbrenner's analysis here of human development. You have microsystems, the systems where children actually live their lives, such as the family, the school, the peer group, the neighborhood, the faith community. Then you have exosystems such as the labor markets, the rights of workers, the healthcare system, the justice system. These are the exosystems that surround children and impact their lives. And then you have a macro system. This is, again, an analysis from Yuri Bronfenbrenner. The macro system is this network of ideas, powers, beliefs, and often prejudices, as you see in the opposition to the CRC. It's about prejudices. So I was using this analytical framework and trying to look at whether the CRC would make a difference in the actual lives of real children. And obviously I can't tell you in 15 minutes this 350-page book with all its footnotes, but I wanted to give you a couple of examples of places where I saw and illustrated the impact of the CRC on children's lives. The first one I want to talk about is, I should mention also that the CRC has been very important to me because I've used it as a framework for answering the question, what do children need? I think it's a really great framework. What do children need? And there are certain universal needs that children have. And I think the CRC, although there has been some debate about how it exactly applies, it really goes to the heart of that. It's about what children need. They need to be safe. They need to have the right to live. They also have a tremendous need for expression and engagement. So all of these different kind of rights or values are contained in the CRC. Well, anyone who's looked at the data knows, and it's been clearer recently in US news media, that the US is way behind on many, many measures of children's well-being. And I mean, high rates of child poverty, high rates of maternal mortality, school dropouts, lack of things like family leave and universal health care, and a rising level of social inequality. These are the kinds of youth violence is another thing, the whole issue of, one of the things I found in my research was that a child born in the United States was 30 times more likely to end up in prison than a child born in Italy. And it's not because the Italian children are all angels. They get into trouble too. But the way of handling that is completely different. And it's based on the principles of the CRC. Now, I have to be careful I don't go way over time, so you'll stop me if I do. But I wanted to give you a couple of examples from my research of places where the CRC really made a difference. The first one I'm going to give you is a child that I call Angelo. I don't use children's real names unless it's appropriate because they've been very public about their involvement. But this is a child named Angelo, and he lives in a city called Lecce in Italy. It's down near the bottom of the Italian boot. It's shaped like a boot, so it's down there in the south. And I met him because I was there looking at the juvenile justice system and how it impacted children's lives. Well, one of the outcomes of the ratification of the CRC in Italy was to re-examine the rules about children's punishment as opposed to rehabilitation for children. And the age level for responsibility for a crime in Italy, you can't be charged with a crime unless you're 14 years or older. So for younger children, it's all about providing services. But for a 14-year-old, and Angelo was just 14, he just crossed that line, he got into bad trouble, not terrible violent trouble, but he was in serious trouble. And the Italian system in Lecce had recently been revised based on the CRC, based on the principles of the CRC, to emphasize rehabilitation as opposed to harsh punishment. And so I visited the place where Angelo was being, where he was going for his treatment. He was a child with a single mother and very, very active. You know, you could see from an instantly that he had some kinds of disabilities because he could not sit still. He was all over the place, up and down, under the chair, around the chair. And what they did with him was they brought him into, he was not, instead of being placed in some kind of institution, every day after school, someone from the organization that was helping him, it was on a farm, it was a farm that it had a staff, including a psychologist. They would pick him up at school, bring him to the place where, because he was getting in trouble after school, bring him to that place, and they would work with him. And speaking of homeschooling, one of the solutions they came to was that Italy has homeschooling too. So they decided he really needed to be schooled on that campus because he was having such trouble with his impulse control. And so they brought him to the campus, and they put him in charge of the horses. There were a bunch of horses on that farm. And because he was caring for the horses, he learned math, he learned to read, he learned all kinds of things having to do with caring for the horses. And at the time I met him, he had just successfully graduated both from high school and from this rehabilitative program. And it was such a sharp example of the difference between what happens to children who end up being put on probation, then they land in jail because they violate their probation, then they're in an institution, and pretty soon, you know, they're in the school to prison pipeline. So I could see the difference that the CRC had made for this child and for every child in Italy because of their reforms of their system to place rehabilitation and particularly re-entry into the community life far ahead of punishment. So that's one story that I could point to. Another one has to do with healthcare. One of the things I saw in Italy, in the communities where I was, every time I visited a school, the CRC, there was something posted on the wall, children's rights, there'd be pictures. Children would engage in activities around their own rights and the rights of other children. But what also happened was that this percolated up to the families and parents. Listening to television, you'd hear a presenter say, and here are the children doing such and such, because you know play is an essential right of the child. There was a rights talk. Everyone was talking about children's rights in a very positive way. In the little community where I was working, people became very upset because there is universal health care in Italy and everyone is covered by it. But the government was trying to close the punto nascita, which is the place where, like a maternity ward, a maternity hospital. And they were trying to close the local one and have everyone go farther away. And what I found was that there was a groundswell of opposition to this from all of the people in the village, even the ones who did not use that particular maternity hospital. And the way they put it was, every child has a right to a good start in life. And we need to have local hospitals that the mothers can go to give birth so that the children can bond with them and they don't have to leave their families. And I encountered in many different places in my studies in Italy that I would ask a question. For example, I'll give you the area of special education. I said, well, is there opposition to mainstreaming children with special needs into the school system? And instead of the kind of debate I often heard in the United States about, well, that's going to undercut my child's learning experience, the answer would be, but every child has a right to go to school. So I do think that one of the things that happens with the CRC when it is ratified and entrenched is people begin to think in terms of children's rights rather than my right to control my child's education, economic status, etc. And the third example, if I have time, I can't tell if I do, but you'll stop me if I go way over, was actually around youth participation. In my work in Italy, I could see that because of ratification of the CRC, the Italian government had gone forward with various steps to implement children's rights to participation. So there were concrete ways in which children were authorized to participate in schools, in government deliberations. But the place where I really witnessed this firsthand was actually in Wales. Wales was one of the first, Wales being a sub part of the UK. But Wales has a lot of independence in its own government. I was invited to Wales because of my work with children's rights by the youth, the group that had been established as their youth parliament. They had named themselves Funky Dragon, which was, you know, great name. And they were giving a seminar or a conference on children's rights in Wales. This is young people, 18 and under. And I went to the conference and I spoke at their conference. But when I arrived there, this was around 2014, the Welsh government had just decided that they didn't think children should run this, and that they were going to give the running of the youth parliament to adults. Well, the young people who had been learning how to run their own youth parliament would not give up, and the young person that was instrumental in making sure that this did not stand was a young man named Matthew. And Matthew had been a member of the youth parliament since he was in middle school. And when this whole change was looming, he got together a campaign of youth, of young people, and they campaigned. They went to speak to the UN Committee on Children's Rights, and they campaigned tirelessly until they finally got the attention of the Welsh Parliament. And as of, I think it was 2018 or 2019, the first official legally independent youth parliament was established in Wales. And it was because of these young people's advocacy. At one point, they had thousands of signatures on a petition, thousands of young people's signatures on a petition, and they took it to the parliament in the capital of Wales, and it's Cardiff. And someone there told them, "You have no right to be here. You're children. You have no right to be here. Get out." And this young man said to me in his interview, "I knew that was wrong. I knew that was a violation of the rights of the child under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I was not going to let that stand." And they succeeded. And that is a living example of how the implementation leads to a kind of growth in respect for and faithfulness, I guess I should say, to the basic principles of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So that's what I've been doing is that kind of investigations.
So thank you so much for those lovely, lovely and meaningful examples. And now I wonder, Meg and Barbara, if you want to take just a couple of minutes and if you have any questions or comments for one another.
Yeah, I have a question for Barbara. I'd like to, this is a big picture question, but Barbara, I'd like to get your assessment as to whether or not you think we're backsliding in this country on our views of children. We're tracking this informally. And of course, things have never been great, but I felt like there was a period of time when we were making some progress. And there seems to be an increasing incidence of legislation at the state level to really undermine children's rights and promote adult rights. And sometimes these legislations are pieces are not well formed. And we're in a very interesting political period that I think many of us never would have anticipated. Just curious, from your professional view, you follow this so closely, you've been in the legal system, you've traveled, you can compare and contrast US and global. I'm just wondering what your kind of 10, 20-year sense is about, are we moving forward, progressing, zigzagging?
Well, I share your concerns, and I think it's absolutely a pivotal moment for us. And I have a mix of I get, here's the best way that I can express it. I think in terms of opposition to children's rights, the opposition has gained incredible strength through all of the things that you mentioned in your talk. But I also see a tremendous growth of youth activism.
Yep.
And I think that I mean, and they are the future, whether, you know, whether we acknowledge it or not. The kids in Florida, at Parkland, the Dreamers, Black Lives Matter, so many different groups of young people, and particularly now the climate change advocates. That's where the real power of the future is. And I think it's going to be quite a mythic struggle between going backward and authoritarianism and suppression, and going forward into the future. And I was very heartened today. One of my friends shared with me an article in the Guardian about a UNICEF study that showed that young people are much more than older generations, really focused on the future, believing that this is, as the children in Carrie E. Tompkins School said, we are one, but we are many. They're believers in the future and in the capacity of societies to change and to grow and to be better. So I guess I'm both terrified and also optimistic. But I think everybody needs to be working hard on this, because, you know, what Meg was saying about we underestimated how rapidly and how completely the actual truth could be supplanted by a complete, you know, these are it's the critiques of the Convention on the Rights of the Child are totally bizarre. There's no truth there.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. That was a beautiful answer. Really, really right about the young people and that opportunity we have. So I feel better having heard you.
I think in this wonderful moment, I just want to move to answer one question from the chat. One question from the chat. Jane Polity asks, is the CRC considered customary law for the US?
I think that you know, from a legal perspective, there is a strong argument that, and it's been made many times, and I think pretty effectively, that the CRC is or should be customary law. Now, once again, we're up against a movement to denigrate and marginalize international law and international human rights. So if you were to ask the current Supreme Court, is the CRC customary law? I think they would say no resoundingly. But if you were to ask most scholars around the world if they think that the CRC is customary law at this point, they would say yes.
Thank you. Please, we're welcoming now questions or comments from the floor. You can say something in the chat, or you can raise your hand electronically, or you can raise your hand physically, and I'll try to see you. Or you can shout out.
Let me see if I can see the chat.
I can see the chat. Ah, yes, Melissa, thank you.
I work with Indigenous people in Namibia, the Jinkwasi, and I just wanted the whole response about punishment. And the way they correct their children is with a guidance. This is the way we do things. There is no word, direct translation for mistake, and children are accorded all the rights that are in the CRC. They are our oldest living democracy, and that is how they've brought up their children. That's it.
Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna pull myself out of the chair if nobody doesn't shout me down. Please shout me down. I'm liable to talk too much. Yes, Jane, thank you. Jane?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
I was a social worker in Italy for many years. And regarding mainstreaming, I just remember I was a town social worker, so I'd go into classrooms and I met with teachers and parents, and there were so many children who were mainstreamed. They had AIDS, low vision, low hearing. They had AIDS in the assistants in the classrooms, but they were there. Yeah. Only the children who were really, really severely compromised were in kind of a day care center, which was actually terrific. A whole bunch of social workers, we got together and we helped create this center where the children who really couldn't go to school went, and they did a lot of alternative activities. But mainstreaming was absolutely the norm. And I remember when I came to New York and I was doing a program at NYU, and I decided to research what was going on in the United States regarding these issues. And I was horrified because I said, wow, I mean, this is like the Middle Ages. And the only program I could really find that was quite good was Head Start, which did a pretty good job. But then again, it depended on the administration. You had to get everybody in sync. But there was a lot to be said about the way things were being handled in Italy, and they were doing it very well at that point in time.
When was that, by the way?
Well, let's see, I came over here in the 90s, and so I was working actively in the late 70s, the 80s over there. Yeah.
Well, mainstreaming is part of a very strong emphasis on mainstreaming is part of the Italian educational, national educational law. And my observations, one of the things that I thought, sitting in on classes, and I sat in on many classes, I feel like this relates also to the idea of trusting and respecting children, because what I saw was that the other children in the class were very, very instrumental in helping support the children who had learning difficulties. And there was a sense of this, they don't call it in mainstreaming, they call it inclusion. There was a sense that all of the kids in the class banded together to be supportive of the child who had special needs. I remember being in a class where an autistic child had a total meltdown, everyone in the class knew what to do. And it was not send the child to the principal, it was kind of gathering around and being supportive. And I think that one of the pluses of that system is a sense of solidarity amongst the children, not exclusion, but inclusion.
So I'm going to move along to Milena DiMaggio, who had a question about how younger people can get involved and advocate for the ratification of the CRC. And there is another question behind that one, okay? Meg, do you have an answer to that or a way of addressing that?
Well, if you send me your email, I will actually put you in touch with a couple of people who are working in this field with young people. There are some disparate groups out there, but I could certainly put you in touch with one or two because it would be independent from the work that we are doing right now in the campaign. But you just put your name in the chat box and I will put my email address in as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Also, one of the things that I'm recommended in the last chapter of my book, there are lots of options for advocacy to create, say, a child-friendly city or a child-respecting neighborhood, or there are a lot of ways on a local basis that kids can get together and be part of a movement to not directly ratify the CRC, but to spread and implement the principles.
Thank you. And another question, whoops. What efforts to ratify the CRC are happening at the local and state levels in the US? That's from Shirley Gatano Gable. Shirley, do you want to add to that?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Either of you, Meg, do you want to talk about that? And then
Yeah, I can say right now that there's probably things going on that I don't know about, but we're not really promoting a lot of resolutions or state resolutions right now because they get shot down by the opposition. But there's a couple of things you might want to do to find out more details. First of all, Mark Engman is the Vice President for Public Policy at the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. And they have been taking a stand with looking more strategically at children's rights within their national programming, and may be able to hook you up. I can put Mark's email in the chat box. He may be able to hook you up with some people who are doing some things that are gaining some traction that you might want to join, because this period is kind of interesting. You have people working in various ways on different projects, but nothing that's totally unified right now because we're coming out of a period when we just haven't had enough success to build on that. But I will give you Mark's his email address, and he's speaking this week on Saturday. There's a UNA USA session on children's rights and next steps, and he'll be speaking at that as well.
Great. Thank you.
And other questions we're getting toward the end of our time, but if there's still space for a few other questions, if anybody has them.
Yes, so if I may.
Yes, please.
I have been including the information about the CRC in my college level social studies and early childhood education courses for 30 years. And one of the problems is, so then the students get very upset, especially when we got to the point where the United States is the only country that hasn't ratified. It has signed in and not ratified. So I'm wondering if any of the things that you talked about or any publications that you would recommend specifically, because the people who I was teaching are the people who are going out to be the teachers, and they're going to be the teachers over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades.
Mm-hmm. Any comments?
I know what you're saying, because it's hard to say, if not now, when, after 30 years. It really is. But one option for kind of encouraging teachers and students to take this seriously is to expose them to the strength of the international studies on this. And Oxford just published a handbook on the rights of the child, massive, wonderful, detailed piece of work with contributions from all different countries and all kinds of people. And it illustrates the fact that we in the United States are living in a vacuum of information. And so to the extent, I think, to the extent that they see young people like Greta, for example, advocating, it helps. But also just being able to say, this is a serious area. Everywhere else in the world, you know, it's accepted as a basic premise. And we are living in the dark ages. I shouldn't say the dark ages, because that's not true anymore. We are living in a very child rights deprived environment. Better way to put it.
I have a different question to Barbara, because we've heard about Italy, the small town, but I would like to hear how you found the small town in Florida. Were the parents receptive to their children's rights? How did they respond to you? Was there any movement there to move the whole thing ahead? Because like I was thinking back, I happened to have been on the 20th anniversary of the CRC. I happened to be in France, and they had actually done a tiny little booklet that I just figured out that I still had. And this is like a children for adults, 5 stories for the adults about the rights of their children. This was just, it was like, and I thought, gee, why don't we figure out something like that in the States and disseminate it to everybody?
Well, I will tell you that I did not go into either village saying, I'm here to write about children's rights. I went into the villages saying, I'm very interested in the lives of children and families, and I'm here to observe and to talk with you and to find out how children live. When you talk to people about the environment for children, they're perfectly comfortable. If I had the town I focused on in the United States was a town where I had a dwelling, I had a residence. If I had gone in there and said, I want to learn about the rights of the child, I would have been greeted by the same kind of opposition that you're talking about. No, there would have been no, it would have been like a red flag. But when I went in saying, what is life like for children here? You know, how do they meet with each other? Where do they play? What's it like to be a child in this town? The 2 villages turned out to be very similar in terms of being very protective of the children, having a strong feeling that all the children in the village were their children. And, you know, we miss that in the big cities, but the sense that, for example, I asked in Scano, I asked, where are the poor children? And the answer was, there are no poor children, because if children need something, we get it for them. You know, we figure it out. And in Cedar Key, when I asked, what can you tell me about childhood in Cedar Key? One young man said, Cedar Key raised me. And I asked him what he meant. He said, well, I was growing up without any parental, you know, I didn't have any family members that were really there for me. And this town they raised me. They took me in. I lived with this family, then I lived with that family. So if you can stay away from the politics, people are strongly in favor of a good environment for children. They want their town to be a great place for these children. But once you start using rights in the United States, you get a lot of pushback.
I was wondering, I'm interested in Meg's question to Barbara about, are we backsliding on our views of children in the United States? So, I don't know if you've all read Barbara's book, Hidden in Plain Sight, which is a wonderful book. In fact, we've been talking about having the membership read the book and have a discussion. And the book is the tragedy of children's life from Ben Franklin to Lionel Tate.
Yes.
So my question is, has there ever been a time where the rights of children was important in our society?
Well,
and the second part of that is, I relate to what you're saying about small communities and, everyone knows everyone knows the children and they want to do the right thing for children. And no, there are no poor children because we would, we provide for that child. And some of that is true and some of it isn't, especially in this country.
Yeah.
Okay, let's name the rural areas in small villages, but that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do we accomplish this in urban settings?
One of the things I did in the new book, I'm glad you liked that first book, but and I agree with you that the United States has been very far behind in general. We have a lot of original sins having to do with obviously with the slavery and the oppression of the first peoples, and on and on, misogyny, gun violence, but getting to the idea of what you can do in an urban setting. I looked at two settings, one in New York City, which is the Harlem Children's Zone, and I'm sure most of you know about that, and also in Naples, which is a very poor city, large city but poor, in Italy, called La Sanità. And they were both examples of attempts to create that kind of community value, solidarity, community identity that would be inclusive and would position particularly the young people to make changes in their environment and to want to stay in their environment. And I think those are two good examples of attempts to take that small townness, and institute it in a larger setting. I don't know how social media is going to end up kind of either helping or hurting with that, but it's a new world. But I do think I think it can be done in an urban setting, but it requires breaking down some of those barriers that come from just being so many people that you don't know where to start.
I'm gonna thank you. Oops, Karan.
I just was reflecting about where our allies for children's rights today. And I recall in my own professional society, the American Psychological Association, many years ago, developed a resolution and adopted the resolution in support of children's rights, and adopted a second resolution calling upon state psychological associations to do likewise. I don't know of any data about how those resolutions have been evaluated over time in terms of, are they monitored to see what progress are being made? And I think with regard to the American Psychological Associations, it has been one of my observations that they do not do a systematic review or monitoring of the many human rights resolutions they have. And the question is, why have a human rights resolution if you're not going to have a follow-up and monitoring of it? But I just wonder, among the professional societies in the United States, whether there are current core that we could draw upon as allies in this ratification struggle.
Mary, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think, I should mention to you that in, well, several years ago, we did this huge CEO sign-on letter to Obama with all the presidents of leading associations, and we really had some good representation from your sector, Karan. We actually, I'm thinking to myself that we probably have to re-examine whether it's time for us to go back out with another sign-on letter like that. Because we did not have any problem getting presidents to sign on, from the American Pediatrics Association down to World Vision. 150, a good 125, 150 people. And you're right, there's been a plethora of work that's been done by the professional associations for decades on this. And I see the opportunity to learn from that and then to bring the new, genre of professionals forward in this engagement. And one way of doing it might be to offer some mobile, some focus, for a letter to a sign-on letter to Biden. I mean, I understand that he's made some commitment to the climate action, and I'm sure it's because of all the activity that's going on after COP. So, I appreciate you reminding me. And of course, you've been following this for so many decades. So I think you are a great beacon of light for people who might need to be persuaded that we have to get behind this politically.
I think we also have to include teachers' unions. I mean, we always have to start with the children. I'm a retired school librarian and a retired early childhood person. And can you imagine the pressure that teachers are under in this country right now?
Yeah.
With, you can't teach 1619 Project, you can't teach critical race theory, you cannot talk about racism, they're going to remove your books from your library. We've got
You
to
have to have both sides of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another one. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And Indigenous people. There's so much pressure on teachers, and I think we really need to get teachers' unions aboard.
Yep.
Because we're the ones who teach the children.
Yep. And we did have a lot of educators, National Education Association signed on, teachers unions. I'm sure we had 2 teachers unions who signed on originally to that as well. Yeah. No, I mean, I think we can't undermine the strength that we have in this moment, but thank you. Yeah, a little call to action for us I can bring to our meeting tomorrow.
It would be great to see a list. I think it would go on for a long way. Of organizations that have already endorsed it.
Yeah.
For an example, is the SOAR Optimists of America.
Yep.
This is not a radical,
I know.
a radical left,
Right.
But and to maybe have that reaffirmed.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right, Barbara.
So those are your 1 minute before our scheduled closing.
We're not hearing Martha.
Final word you'd like us with.
Thank you so much, Meg Gardnier, Barbara Woodhouse, Martha Bragan. This has been a very inspiring and uplifting program. I mean, I feel like we're all should be strengthened and emboldened for a new call to action. And before I turn this over to my co-chair, Margaretta Jones, to close us, please don't leave us. There's so much to say, but I'm sure Margaretta is going to speak and we don't need to just keep saying the same thing over and over again. But Barbara mentioned the tremendous growth of youth activism. And in this country and worldwide, the young people are on fire and they want to be heard. And yes, they are really concerned about their future. And with that, I want to present our last young person and musical selection. And the selection is called Ode to Life. And it's been composed and it is sung by Isabel Santini, a student at Young at Arts, Performing Arts, and serving children and youth in Westchester County. And it is under the direction of Ms. Sharon Priddle. Isabel Santini, Ode to Life.
I'll take my anger, I'll take my hate, I'll take my privilege and advocate. I see your struggles, I see your plight, I see your bruises, and I will fight. All lives won't matter unless black does too. I may be white, but I stand with you.
Well, there's a lot of news to get to tonight. George Floyd left behind a 6-year-old daughter.
We are denied not only civil rights, but even
Devastated. George will never get to see her chase those dreams.
We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We shouldn't have to protest because y'all are treating us wrong.
I pray for equality. I pray for love. I pray for acceptance. Dear God above, hear my prayers and hear my Christ. 'Cause I'll keep praying until no one dies. Our lives won't matter unless black does too. I may be white, but I stand with you. I am your ally. I am your friend. We'll fight together. I will defend you. Our blood is red. Our tears are blue. Our hearts both beat. Mine beats for you.
Marvelous, marvelous.
So now we'd like to have a closing with Margareta. Here you are. Hi.
You're muted, Margareta.
I'm sorry. I am thrilled about having been part of this program. Thank you all for attending and participating on commemorating the 32nd anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, just 2 days early. It'll be in 2 days. A very special thank you to our young singers, their teachers, and the composer. Thank you also for the dancer. And for the singers, I want to thank you for the gift of your voices, and please continue lifting us all up with your music. Thank you, Martha, Meg, and Barbara, for your absolutely wonderful, wonderful work that you're all doing. And I try to figure out how we can support you, how we can move together, or where we can hook in with all your work. And as far as I know, we're going to put this program on our website, which is www.childrightsny.org. And if any of you want to join us as members, there's a membership page on there as well. And other than that, thank you, Marlena, and thank you, Therese, for bringing all these artists and your wisdom to us as well. It sort of made me remember also, like not too long ago, I mean, a couple of years ago, some of you who have been in the child rights places, you probably know of Jean Zermatten. He was at one point the chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. And he started a program, a course at the University of Geneva saying children at the heart of human rights. And I think if we are following that course as well, I think we will do good work. Other than that, as an adult, I would like us all to remember that we were children once. And that's the one thing we all have in our common humanity. So thank you all, and onward, forward and onward, and maybe we'll get there.
Thank you all, and we hope to see you again. Thank you for your inspiration and helping us to move forward. And if we can ever help any of you or be part of anything you're doing or help to move it forward, you know where to find us. We're here for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody, and safe journey to the next room since we don't have to go out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
so much.
Okay. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good to see you all. Take good care. Thank you, Margarita.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Thank you, Therese. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, Martha. Bye, Barbara.
Hi, good
Bye.
seeing you again.
Good
Bye.
to see you again. Okay. Take
Yeah,
care.
you look unchanged.
Oh, I don't know. But anyway, we loved having your interns in. If they ever want to send some more back, let us know.
We would actually, so
Yeah.
let's talk about that. We very much
Okay.
want to send.
Okay, good. I know
Okay.
COVID got in the way of that, but
Yeah,
okay.
but we can do it now.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Let's all read Barbara's book so we'll learn
Yes, I know.
Oh,
I know.
ecology is wonderful. The ecology of childhood is wonderful.
Let's
Bye.
also remember not to malign the children who are affected by violence and get confused by the rhetoric and calling them violent children.
Thank you for that.
That's just,
And thank you, Martha, for the wonderful volunteers you sent to us.
oh, they are amazing.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. I have,
I guess we don't want to leave. We want to have more conversations here. It feels like.
There's a lot more to say.
a lot more to think about, but thank you all. I'm just trying to make sure that I copy all the necessary material off the chat before we close. That's why I'm hanging around.